Hello and welcome to session 3 of You Are Good Enough. I hope the first 2 sessions were a benefit for you. I hope you're diving into both the fire starter journal method and listening prayer, and that you're starting to spend some time in prayer that maybe you haven't before, in journaling that maybe you haven't before. And I pray to God that He is actually speaking to you in a way that you know who you are in Christ, that your identity is starting to flourish in Him. Today we're going to talk about Egypt and running away from Egypt, or walking away from Egypt. It's all about the Israelites when they were in slavery, in bondage in Egypt, and Moses came to free them. So they were all excited about their freedom and moving into the promised land, and they started to move away from Egypt, and things got tough. It was a battle in the desert for 40 years going towards their promised land. But what they did is they started to look in the rearview mirror. They started to look back and go, wow, Egypt was pretty good. Slavery wasn't that bad. And we all do that, sadly. We all start to move ahead in Christ. We find this identity, we have a new epiphany in who we are in Christ, and we take some faith steps. And we start walking in faith instead of fear. And guess what? The enemy attacks. The enemy makes us look back at our old life and even our sin, and makes it look maybe a little more appealing than stepping out in faith and walking into a potential battle with Christ. So today you're going to talk about that. We're going to ask the questions amongst the group. It's, what is your Egypt? Do you think God knows about your concerns? Do you trust God? Can you walk through the battle that you might be in towards the promised land? Are you confident that there is a promised land out there for you? Because if you're not, Egypt is going to look awful good. Do you trust God to do the job? Do you really trust God? Are you walking in faith, or are you locked down in fear? And most of us will quickly answer the questions, oh yeah, I have faith. Oh yeah, I'm not tempted to go back to Egypt. But the fact is, how do you walk out your faith? How do you walk out a life filled with this new identity in Christ? Those are the hard questions that I want you guys to answer today. I want you to be honest and open with your group. Name the things that are Egypt. Name the things that you have to walk away from. Talk about the sin that might pull you back. The first step towards freedom is being aware of your sin, aware of your Egypt, and being vulnerable and honest enough to talk about it, because then we get it out in the open. It doesn't look so bad anymore, and we can pray about it as a group. My Egypt wasn't an obvious sin pattern. The first time that I became aware of this thinking of Egypt was sadly when my wife Molly passed away. I was broken beyond measure, and I had a moment where I just cried out to God, and I said, God, you have got to speak to me today. I'm not even knowing where to go in the Bible, so I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to speak to me and tell me where to go in the Word. And I'd never done that, and I never had the faith that God would actually speak to me. But sure enough, that day, I heard Deuteronomy. And I'm thinking, Deuteronomy? I wouldn't be thinking Deuteronomy myself, so I figured that had to be of the Lord. I would have picked something in the New Testament like Matthew or something that I could digest easily. I didn't think I could digest anything in Deuteronomy. So I said, okay, I heard Deuteronomy. Now what chapter and verse? And honestly, the number 20 jumped in my head. Again, I was shocked. So I said, okay, Deuteronomy 20. Now what verse? Now what verse, God? Okay, I'll wait. Now what verse? Crickets, nothing. So I figured God wanted me to look at the whole chapter. So I went to Deuteronomy 20 and I read about the Israelites coming out of Egypt and being willing to go through the battle. It's all about going to war, and they were stepping into a war, and that's why Egypt looks so good. And I realized right then at that moment, in that moment for me, my Egypt was Molly. And I had to move away from her. Obviously, I had no choice, but I was so broken that I was willing to stay in that brokenness and just crumble up and die. And God was calling me to the battle. God was calling me to go to war, to have strength in Him, because I didn't have strength in me at the time, to step out and move forward. And sadly, for me at the time, I thought anyway, move away from my past. But I had no choice but to move forward because He did have a promised land for me. And part of that promised land is me teaching this and me being able to be part of Ignite Purpose. So I hope that helps you. That may be a quite radical, random Deuteronomy, walking away from Egypt example, but I hope you can get vulnerable and really think hard about what are some of the Egypts in your life that you need to move away from. Knowing who you are in Christ and having that identity is the first step. Knowing what you need to walk away from, being self-aware of some of your sin, is the second part, and that's what you're going to cover. So be open and honest, and I hope you have a great session today. Be blessed.